Thank you, Greg and Zach and Dominic, for joining today and talking to Golden Gate about Stride Souls. Excited to have you all on board and excited to learn more about what it is you all do and what makes Stride Souls special. So yeah, I'll let you take it away, Greg.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you to GGTC for allowing us to present. My name's Greg Gerla, co-founder and CEO of Stride Souls, also a Ironman, and I'm in a long distance program. So do a little bit of building businesses and then being bad at triathlon at the same time. And I'll let Dominic and Zach introduce themselves too.
Sure, I'll go next. My name's Zach Carton. I'm a physician by training. After medical school, I went the business route, and I met Greg at business school in France, of all places. Um, I am not an Ironman, but I don't know if I've ever told Greg or you, Dominic, this, but the I am the Lawrence Middle School mile distance record holder, at least maybe 15 years ago. Somebody probably broke it since then. So I do have some running under my legs. Um, but very nice to meet you. Thanks so much for having us. And yeah, Dominic, I'll let you introduce yourself next.
Yeah, thanks. So my name is Dominic. I'm a paid orthotist and working in our family business in our own clinic in Germany. My sports background is a bit different than what you're used to in America. I'm a handball player. I don't know if even know what that is. So it's indoor sports that, yeah, I grew up with.
Tell me about Stride. What makes your insoles different than ones I can grab from, the store, the ones that they have available off the shelf? Like what makes your product special?
Greg, tell him the story. Why did you start Stride?
Yeah. I'll tell a story and then I'll let the medical team explain it in detail. But pretty much, I've had flat feet for my entire life. I've always worn orthotics, um, always paid a lot of money for orthotics. And the story of starting Stride takes us about 3 years ago in Chicago, where I paid close to $1,000 for a pair out there. I had to take multiple trips to the podiatry office, put my foot in a pretty nasty cast, and then wait close to a month and a half for these orthotics to arrive. They finally arrived, and they were much lower quality than even things that I could get off the shelf or at my local drugstore. And that frustration manifested into me studying abroad and then just being walking around and being kind of upset, thinking, there's got to be some better, faster, cheaper way to do this and to make these orthotics. More of a problem statement that I introduced to the ether while I was studying abroad in France. And Dr. Zach, of all people, a fellow American living in France, going to the business school, responded. And together we started realizing that actually there was a lot of opportunity to take this podiatry field and bring it to the home. Zach had experience doing prenatal imaging with the phone. So we're like, hey, we could kind of adopt that same technology with the phone using the front facing camera to actually scan the foot, taking a lot of what they already do in the podiatry office, but just allowing anyone to do it at home. Uh, Take that in combination with asking the same questions that you get in a clinic, and then gait analysis, another very thing that similar thing you'd get in the clinic, and combine that data, and you can actually create a amazing orthotic, which is what we have here, which we 3D print, or Dominic does the 3D printing out in Germany. So they're all handmade and quite a feat of engineering. And I'll let you guys kind of break it down a little bit further with describing the product.
Yeah, well, I think the one other point to the story that's very cool is we had the sort of know-how when it came to the technology and the patient interaction. But we don't, I'm not a podiatrist. When I trained in medical school, in fact, they didn't really talk about the feet all that much. Um, so we didn't know how to design insoles. So we went about contacting like every orthotics maker, podiatrist in Europe and the US, and we were looking for someone with like a tremendous amount of experience doing this, but also someone who was willing to be a little bit innovative. A lot of podiatrists didn't like the idea of patients doing their own scanning. What if they mess it up? What if they say the wrong thing that, they wanted to own it and have total control? But that's the problem with access. If the doctor has that much control, it's just so much harder for the patient to get care. And of all the people we spoke to, it was Dominic that kind of liked the idea the most of trying to get this solution out there to help people wherever they are. And yeah, Dominic, I know you've explained to us so many times all the insole and orthotic philosophies out there, and maybe you could share the PEDCAD and stride philosophy.
Yeah, sure. And yeah, you made a good point there. Thanks for the kind words, first of all. What we're working on our whole life, like the family business history, is we always wanted to try to make the good quality of insoles accessible to everyone in the world. So like we had customers all over the world all the time. And what we realized is that there's not a common approach. Like in every country, it's very different how insults are seen, how insults are used. And speaking about how our philosophy is simply we don't want to like just passively stabilize, passively align the foot. We want to stimulate muscles by changing the load on the tendon so the body realizes the change. And our insoles, I always say, they're a training device. So that means the more you walk on them, the more the body adapts. And the goal is to strengthen muscle, right? So we don't want to passively just press you in some position. We want to innervate so you bring yourself into that position. And then we don't want to stop at the foot or at the feet. We see it as a whole. So what we do is with our own patients, we do a full body analysis before insoles to find out what might be wrong. And after insole, so both bare feet measurements, and then we analyze the whole body, how the alignment changed. And so we have a holistic approach, and yeah, that's probably the difference. And of course, the usability. What I liked so much about your idea was, I mean, first of all, the app, which was quite cool. I've never seen that before, scanning your feet with the phone. And it enables us to scale this out so much to help people out there that have similar experience than like Greg does, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, one of my favorite things about being part of this company is like the emails I get. One, people asking like, "Hey, I've been going to a podiatrist. I have a prescription. Like, can you just make it for us? I don't want to have to go back and pay another like $600, and that's no problem." And then the people who uh, never got the prescription in the first place, we get to do the analysis ourselves, do the design, and it's like people just can't believe um, how effective they can be, how life-changing they can be. It's very cool. So yeah, it's been a pleasure working with you on this. Um, and when it comes to GGTC, I've seen a couple people putting orders in. Do you know how they've been doing so far?
No, I think the code went out relatively not too long ago, so we can definitely check in with those folks once they get their products.
Okay. Yeah, it was exciting.
Okay.
It was pretty fast, quite a few people. So yeah, I'll be looking forward to hearing how they're doing.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, why is it like, why do we even think that we can help runners, right? There's like the history. Greg is used to running marathons. We all have a sports background, and what we see a lot is that the injuries or the issues that runners face, they're very similar. So there's like the shin splints, like the heel spurs that they all have, and why do insoles help even? Actually, it's pretty easy to explain. Having trouble with your body is nothing like natural, obviously, right? The most unnatural thing we all do is wearing shoes. And a lot of shoes, they're made nowadays just for being fashionable, even running shoes, right? But to be accommodative to the foot, that's the thing. Very often, the shoes people wear they cause the muscles to weaken, they cause the whole body, the whole system to degenerate, because muscle, bone, they all grow by load. So if you take off the load with huge amounts of cushioning, for instance, the whole body structures, they decrease. And that's where we have the approach. So add a insole to a shoe to keep the muscles stimulated and trained.
Yep. Awesome. I'll just hop in with a question because you sparked my interest. Do you mind explaining what would be your recommendation for type of shoe to wear to lessen injuries? I know you mentioned like shoes have too much cushion, but what's like your recommendation for GGTC to wear for shoes? Not brand necessarily, but just style.
What they should all have. The type of shoe very much depends on the level of the athlete. So if you have very high trained athletes, they might get along with softer shoes, which is okay for them because they already have this muscle strength. If it's more a still high level runner, but not like this real professional athlete, I'd say, is important to give the foot space, right? That's first of all. So having a wide toe box. If we take a look at natural folks, their foot actually is very wide, right? The toes are spread. That gives stability. We have those running shoes nowadays that are very slim. So we put the foot in a situation where it's not possible to stabilize the body anymore. So first would be having a wide toe box. That's great. The second thing is about the cushioning, right? Cushioning is good, but I already explained if it's too much of cushioning, it might even cause the body to degenerate. So to have a kind of medium firm build up on the shoe is also a good thing to stabilize the body passively in this case a little bit. Not too soft so the structures don't degenerate. And one thing that I would like to talk about is the drop. You know what a drop is? The heel drop. So shoes very often have a higher heel than they have than they are in the forefoot. And if you take a look again, natural way of walking, the forefoot and the heel area, they're on one level. So having that in a shoe is also a very good idea, especially thinking about Achilles pain, because if you always lift the heel, like without issues in your foot, you will cause issues because the tendon shortens after a while.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you for that answer, Dominic.
Yeah, I think the question that I have is, so we go to the app and get a scan of your foot. How do you go from that to creating an insole that's tailor-made for that individual? You know, what are you looking for with the scan? Like what kind of information are you trying to get from that data?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's a couple things. It's a nuanced answer. So the scan is important. It tells us the shape of the foot, the size of the foot. Often it can tell us about the arch of the foot. If somebody has bunions or hammer toes, we can get that from the scan. Um, while it gives us the shape of the foot, far more important, or maybe equally as important, is the questionnaire that we ask the patient to answer and fill out. They tell us where they're feeling pain. Um, Pain and compensation of your foot and body due to pain is one of the biggest triggers of continued injury or body degeneration, as Dominic is saying. So if we know where you're hurting, which you can't get from a scan, and we know the correct shape of your foot, which we do get from the scan, we're able to design a really tailor-made orthotic for that patient. And then when you add the final piece, which is the gait analysis, that gives us a very good sense of ankle pronation, knee stability, what happens to the arch when the person actually takes a step. So I get a lot of questions about, hey, if I'm doing a scan and I'm not like standing on that, like sometimes people stand on those scanners that are like on the ground. And they go, well, yours doesn't measure me when I'm standing. How do you get that information? We get it from the gait analysis. We can see if the foot is collapsing. And then it's kind of the holistic approach of all these three things together, all the questions that the person's answering, the shape of their foot, the arch of their foot when it's not bearing weight, and finally that gait analysis that allows us to design a really robust orthotic.
Maybe if I can add up here from a manufacturing part. What we do on our stationary clinic is also take several different measurements. So for us, the dynamic is very important. The 3D scan for, as you said, the arch height. So you have different measurement methods within one order process, which is great. So we see different information, we get different parameters because, as you said, Greg, if you only have the 3D scanner standing on it, it's like one picture, right, and one time, which is good for scaling, for arch height, for heel alignment, but being able to see the person whilst walking offers a totally different perspective. Most of the time, especially with runners, of course, problems occur whilst moving. So only having a stationary measurement wouldn't make sense. We want to see the dynamic. And with this workflow that you guys created there, we have all the information that we need.
That actually leads to my next question, and one that I get a lot that I think you guys would be great at explaining. The different type of shoes and athletes and how that dictates the orthotic shape and even the top layer and the mid foam. For example, if I'm somebody that's a runner, how would that orthotic differ? How do you customize it versus somebody that's coming in saying that, say they're a cyclist or they're using boots? How do you guys think, or how do we, but let you guys answer, of like customizing the orthotic for the different shoe types?
Yeah, different activities have different or cause different muscle activity. So like, let's make two extremes here. We're talking about running and maybe skiing, right? First of all, of course, the shoes are very different in terms of shape, width, volume. So we have to match on one case. Always we have to match the foot shape on the upper side. And on the bottom side, we have to match the shoe shape or the boot, ski boot. For running, it's a repetitive movement, right? So you have always or similar loads for like 10 kilometers, 20 kilometers, whatever. Whereas in skiing, for instance, the space inside the boot is very limited and there's totally different muscles active. So we have to adapt the top side towards the activity, what muscles are active, how much space is there, and the bottom side towards the shoe. That means shape, width, length. And this combined with the measurement results and the questionnaire, of course, results in the orthotic.
And then I'd say there's a second component to your question about the mid layers. And it's part a question of function and part a question of comfort. But sometimes when people want their orthotics for sports that have lots of lateral movement, so I'm thinking tennis, pickleball, which we've seen a lot of people be interested in, soccer, that top layer, while comfortable, doesn't offer the same grip as this 3D printed lattice that just comes naturally as part of the printing. Well, I shouldn't say naturally, Dominic and team designed it, but is the natural layer, top layer of the orthotic. So for any activity that requires lots of lateral movement, stopping and going, that top foam layer can sometimes cause a little bit of an issue with grip. However, if somebody's doing a lot of repetitive motion, like running, or they're really stabilized in their ski boot, for instance, that top foam layer might be the pros may outweigh the cons. But to me, it seems like at the end of the day, a lot of it is customer or patient preference. Maybe you disagree, Dominic.
Yeah, you're partly right. I mean, you can see directions in what people from the same sports go. As I said, runners, repetitive. It's even good to have a bit of a slip, so the foot, because it loads a lot, right? So the heel, if you have the heel and the forefoot during the gait, it stretches a bit, right? And if we limit that stretch by having too much grip, that might even cause blisters. Whereas, for instance, we're collaborating with a Bundesliga soccer, how you call it, a soccer team, and they wear their housing the American word cleats,
Cleats.
right? The cleats, they're wearing the cleats so small that this movement, this stretch, does not happen so much because they need so much grip. So for them, even so for football or soccer, we don't use a top cover at all because they want this grip, right? Quick direction changes. They can't afford to even slightly slip. So I agree. It's preference, personal preference. You like it more soft and smooth, or a bit more rough. But it's also that we see from the activity that there's at least advantages for the use case.
Definitely, yeah. And I think the preference comes in a little bit more when we're not giving orthotics to professional athletes, but people maybe playing on the weekend. But yeah, for the ultimate performance, for sure, I think the grip is key for soccer. I have a question, something that I get asked a lot as well. People ask about like how sturdy the insoles are, how rigid they are, and I try to explain that one, they're 3D printed, so we have like unbelievable control about where there is rigidity and where there is flexibility. And I was wondering if you could just, if you have any thoughts or points a little bit about the importance of having both flexibility and rigidity in the same orthotic, as opposed to in the US, people are used to these like really rigid plastic things.
Yeah, that was learning for me. The that your the American approach, and not only America, it's also in the UK or in Australia. The approach is always to have a rigid insole, and they're always speaking about subtalar neutral. So in a static position, maybe there's some pronation, and the only goal is to lift so the heel is straight aligned, right? Whereas what we see is, again, considering muscle activity, if you increase intensity and load, therefore, the foot needs more space because like it stretches more, for instance. Muscle are more active, and if a muscle active muscle, it grows, right? If we have a rigid insole, just like these plastic shell insoles, we don't give the foot the space, or the muscles the space to grow. So it's actually important to have different zones on the insole. So everywhere where's tendons and muscles, we need to have some flexibility so the muscle or the foot has space or the opportunity to get its own space, to make its own space, right? It's only possible if it's soft. Whereas on the outside, so on the shell part, we want to steer the foot a bit to give this extra stability or extra push, extra innovation. Yeah, exactly. And so therefore it's important to have different hard zones on the insole. Yeah, just to accommodate both the stability aspect, but at the same time, we don't want to limit any muscle activity. So it needs to be flexible and like
Is,
cushion.
is there any other way of creating insoles other than 3D printing where you can get kind of the same flexibility of design, or ability to be rigid and soft so interchangeably throughout the one orthotic?
Only with a lot of effort. So I would say first answer, no, there's not. Where we came from, our history, our background, the family business is actually milling. So we had those foams, and then we would carve out the insole shape. But if you want to have different hard zones, you need to prepare that before milling. So it looks like a puzzle, right? You have soft here, medium here, all different materials that you have to glue together before milling the whole block. And of course, in milling, there's then lots and lots of waste. Whereas with a 3D printing, we can exactly determine which zone is how hard without changing the material, and especially nowadays more important than ever, without any waste. So it's very, very environmentally friendly, the production, because we only use the material that is built up in the insole. No
Very
waste.
cool. Yeah, it sounds super annoying for the milling method to have to get it all right and plan it out beforehand. Um,
I actually got the this is like the original orthotic that I used before I decided to start stride soles. And you can see this is polypropylene, so it's super rigid here. And then because they actually only make these orthotics 2/3 length, so you can imagine I paid like close to $1,000 for this, and they're not even bothering to put anything more. This whole top part is just completely useless. And then because they just are forced to use a single, it's not 3D printed, so they just have to use this one piece of plastic here. The only way they're able to do any corrections is to actually glue different things on top, which you can see. The issue with this is that they're going to degrade at different levels because they're different rigidity. And especially if you put more weight on one side, like you can already see that this side is starting to break down before the other side because it's basically just a glued on piece, which is quite different than ours, which is one continuous um, piece here. So it's on top of it being better, it's also lighter. I just want to bring some other points up. This is extremely heavy. This is I weighed it out. It's about 3 times as heavy as ours. So that's a negative. And then also from an environmental standpoint, the way that you're making these traditional orthotics is you're actually taking a big block of essentially just like plastic in your ear or milled the milled material, but essentially it's a big block and you're drilling it down until you get this small amount. So you end up getting the majority of that block is just thrown away and put in some trash can somewhere versus ours is additive as 3D printed. So there's literally no waste because we're only using as so much as we need. And really the only waste is for our last second, just smoothing out the corners. But from an environmental standpoint, it's a very stark difference.
Yeah, I mean, there's other ways you could thermoform this small or thin layer of plastics, but anyways, it's like who does this? To be able to do that, you need a positive of the foot, and that's where it all starts because most people don't use that. So maybe to add a bit more information about this questionnaire, why it's so important. If you can hold up your insole again, the old one, the very expensive one, you see all those parts, they're glued there manually. That means go there next time. How able is someone to glue things exactly the way they did the first time or exactly the way you want it to be? That's why it's so important to us to design insoles CAD based. So we have a 3D scan of the foot. We overlay it with the insole in the CAD system on the computer, and then we can work in 0.5 millimeter steps towards what we need. And that's exactly what's built up in the insole later. If you come back 6 months later, we have the data, we can produce the exact same insole again if you don't want to have a new scan. But let me tell you about that as well. How often should you change the insole? Well, the insoles, they last like forever. The material is very robust, so it wouldn't break. Usually what we say is like a year is no problem at all. The insole itself lasts longer, but since we innervate muscle, it's like a training, right? If you never increase the weights, you stop at a certain level. So for severe cases of pain, it's very often required to have multiple steps. So first insole brings you here, second insole brings you here. So we build up the treatment success.
Yeah, I think that's so cool. It's not a very commonly discussed thing that the original orthotic that may help initially with pain can only take you so far, and the next one has to have subtle design changes. For instance, maybe if someone has really flat feet, the first insole gets a small arch, the next insole is able to strengthen the muscles a little bit more of an arch, and the successive process uh, can really be transformative.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a case study in that. I started out with really flat feet, and I actually went over to our factory over in Germany, and Dominic did some extra scans, and he was like, "You don't really have flat feet anymore." And I'm like, "Well, thank God, I've been training them now for 2 years to build up the strength, which is pretty crazy." That was actually one of the first things that I was shocked about when meeting Dominic, is he had this book of like before and after photos of people with some like pretty crazy uh arch issues, or I don't even know, like bunion type stuff, and it's just remarkable how over time wearing them they could be really relieved of this pain. And it's more of a European approach. It's not really known in the US. I mean, it might be in the future. We hope so, but for right now, it's kind of the standard of the podiatrist to lock somebody into these rigid orthotics that just over time weaken them in front of strengthen them. But of course, that gets a repeat customer. If you're so weak and you need this orthotic as a crutch, you're just going to keep coming back for more.
Maybe to add a bit more information about, like, a lot of runners might sit there now, or sports athletes in general, thinking, well, do we need insoles or orthotics at all? It's not a natural thing to have your foot supported, right? I hear that a lot. And also the question, should I wear insoles only when I'm in pain, or I don't know, preventive? And also for this, to answer that question, is look at what we do all day. We walk on artificial grounds, right? Flat concrete, which is the most unnatural ground you can ever imagine. Additionally, we have those high cushioned shoes that prevent any information from the ground to enter the foot and therefore the brain to adapt. So that means we silence out, we cut out every information. Our feet are so far away. And Zach, you said something very special at the beginning. You're a doctor, and people don't talk about and teach about feet a lot. That's what I see as well. The feet, they're so far away, and most of the time I don't feel them. Only when I'm in pain in that case, but most of the time I don't feel them, so they're so far away I don't care about my feet. Now, yes, it's not natural to have orthotics, of course, but to wear shoes is the most unnatural thing. So we need the orthotics to keep the muscles active. And this is something you have to start at an early age, because once the pain is there, we have to first lower pain before we build up the muscle again. Whereas if you start early, we can keep the muscle activity high that prevents pain even from occurring. I think that's a very important point. And I get, yeah, as I said, asked a lot, is it really necessary to have insoles even though I'm not in pain? So to answer that is always a good idea to at least have a look.
Yeah, awesome. Um, I know we're over time. I have I learned something quite interesting a couple days ago that I'm happy to share, and then maybe we can close close this out. I was speaking with several other friends who are also physicians, and there was a study that came out that related mortality, like how likely you are to die, um, and it's inversely proportional to how flexible and strong your big toe is, and how much kind of mind-body connection you have with your big toe. So people who have really good control, um, it was shown that they will live longer. With the idea being, it sounds a little funny or crazy, but foot health is critical for movement, and one of the signs of slow decline is, foot pain, arthritis of the foot, lack of flexibility, lack of what Dominic is saying with the sensation or proprioception of the foot. And as that slowly decreases, your kind of control over that big toe and the strength of that big toe decreases at the same time. So I'm not saying that if you practice like little toe curls every day, you're going to live forever, but it can't hurt.
Very true.
Cool. Well, great to hear from the folks at Stride, what it's all about. Yeah, I appreciate everyone's time, and we'll get this posted to the drive so anyone can kind of come back and review what we learned today.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And feel free for GGTC people to message me on Slack. I'm in the internal one, so I'm there. Answer any questions, give you a discount code. Just let me know. English
or German, right, Greg? Yeah.
It's not me. I'll send it to you guys.
Okay.
Forwarded.
All right. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate the time. Thanks, everyone.